With me now, Reverend Dr. William Barber II. He is the president of Repairs of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. And Sister Simone Campbell is executive director of Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice and the author of Hunger for Hope, Prophetic Communities, Contemplation, and the Common Good. Good to see you both, Reverend Barber. I'm going to start with you. The coronavirus crisis has magnified inequalities that have existed for decades. How do we avoid going back to a status quo where poverty was treated as a sidebar issue?
Well, thank you so much, my dear sister, also my dear sister Simone Campbell. For years, for decades, it was almost written off. And as the Pope recently said, neoliberalism and trickle-down economics have been taking the country back. You know, I know two Pams, one from the West Virginia mountains who struggled with poverty all her life. And I know another Pam from Loudoun County, Alabama, who died from how COVID hurt the poor. And both of them said that the one that's dead and the one that's living, both said we need a campaign that declares that 140 million people living in poverty and low wage before COVID, 62 million workers making less than $17 an hour in a country where it takes $20 or more an hour to just have a living wage. And 52% or 39% of poor children was wrong. It was caused by unjust systems of neoliberalism and trickle down, and we need policies to change it. This COVID relief bill shows that policy creates poverty and policy can change poverty. And what we must do now is make permanent in this bill that's temporary, and we must press forward to $15 an hour minimum wage, universal health care, infrastructure development. We can do this. It's not whether or not we have the resources. The issue is not a scarcity of resources. It's a scarcity of will. And we must make sure now we're not just celebration, but we have concentration and commitment on taking the next steps quickly, fastly, and with deep commitment to changing the reality of poverty in this country.
So, Simone, I want to talk about one of the policies that the Reverend just referenced that is temporary, but a lot of people want to see made permanent, specifically the expansion of the child tax credit. It was something you advocated for. Why was it so important to you personally to see this included in the relief bill?
Well, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be with Reverend Barber and to be with you, Alicia, to be able to talk about this, because what is urgent in our nation is the struggling of children. Children are hungry. We hear a lot about children having to do virtual school, but what gets lost in that process is the fact that poor, low-income families have had to struggle to feed their kids at all meals, and that there hasn't been school lunches, that the costs, if parents are essential workers, they've had to pay extra costs for childcare. There have been added costs. And the other piece is that the old policies phased in only after the first $2,500 of earnings. And so many low-wage workers who work seasonally didn't make it to the $2,500 threshold. What this new law does is historic. It changes the structure so that families receive the money for the child. So it starts $3,600 per year for families that have kids, any child under 6, $3,000 for every child over 6 to 17 this year. It is a structural change that becomes critically important for our children to flourish. And that is the important piece.
Right. And when you talk about that structural change, I think it's important. It can sound very technocratic, but even how frequently people are getting these payments, right? It used to be that you would get these payments annually. Now it'll be much more regular payments. Reverend Barber, Bess Levin at Vanity Fair writes, Republicans hope to convince people relief bill cutting child poverty in half is the devil's work. What is your message, Reverend, to Republicans who have adamantly opposed these types of policies and are trying to reframe them to voters as a bad thing?
Well, they need to get to know Jesus. The reality is that is a sad situation in politics. But the Republicans we have now are not really the extremists. They've never seen a wage increase they like. They've never seen a tax cut for the wealthy they hate. But what we must do is not so much worry about their rhetoric. We now have to push forward. These things need to be made permanent. But we also have to say you can't ultimately deal with the children if you don't raise wages for the adults. So we have to have a wage increase. We have to have 15. It was shameful for those 8 Democrats to block that. But now we have to put it back on the table. We have to say that, yes, it is good to change the poor children by 50%, or at least what they call that level. But there were 39 million poor children before the pandemic. Billionaires have made over $1 trillion during the pandemic. Structural changes in healthcare and in education and in wages and in these tax credits must all be held together. It's not one solution. It's not one little piece of it. And what we must do is ignore Republicans when they say things like that. Don't get caught up in that rhetoric. Just keep doing the work. Just stay committed. We need to celebrate a little bit on the 50-yard line, but we don't need to celebrate too much. We need to keep working, keep pushing. 1/3 of the country's electorate are poor and low wealth. 55% of poor and low wealth people voted for Biden-Harris. The mandate is there among the people, but more importantly, it's a moral mandate, and it makes economic sense to do this. If we lift from the bottom, we lift the entire country.
And Sister Simone, we can't talk about the economic piece of this without talking about the health crisis that is ongoing in this country. You held a virtual event about how the interfaith community can help overcome what vaccine hesitancy is still out there. What are some of the main things that community faith leaders can do? Why is it important for clergy to speak up about this?
Well, clergies are often the only trusted messengers these days, and I certainly trust Reverend Barber on this. But what we learned from the University of Michigan researchers and Yale University School of Public Health is their testing around the country is that if we talk to people about protecting someone they love, about being a protector, and you just had that fabulous piece about the elderly couple, they had been protecting each other by staying away. It's that quality of being a protector motivates people to both wear a mask and get the vaccine. And what people of faith can do, pastors, ministers, any of us of faith can talk about how important it is to care for our community. And as being a protector, then I know I'll get the vaccine in order to protect you. I'll get the vaccine to protect people I love, and that can make the difference. It's not political. It's the love of community that makes the difference.
Reverend Barber, President Biden, Vice President Harris are kicking off their Help is Here tour next week to tout the benefits of this relief bill. On the ground level, how do you go about educating people about everything that is in the bill, really connecting the dots for them between the legislation itself and the relief that they can start to expect on the ground?
One of the things you do is you just tell the truth. We have been having Moral Mondays for every Monday through the 100 days. We have a massive one coming up Monday all over the country called Stand Against Voter Suppression, Stand for a Moral Agenda. And I would encourage President Biden and Vice President Harris to do this. Tell the truth about the bill, but also tell the challenges, that there are things that are here temporary that are at the end of this year, but they need to be made permanent. Say that this bill is motivation for us to do more. It is not merely celebration for us to say, we've done everything. This proves that if you do a little bit, you can change a lot. So what if we do the whole thing? What if we show this nation that it is something deeply wrong for 43% of this country to be living in poverty and low wealth before the pandemic? And when I think about where we are in this particular moment, we have such an opportunity, with a narrative shift and then a deep commitment. If we take this bill almost like the 1957 Civil Rights Act and use it to get more, not less, but push more, then what will happen is we will not merely have a temporary change, but we will have a transformational change. And listen, we can end poverty and low wealth in this country. So I'm saying to tell the truth, celebrate where we can celebrate, but also say to people, we need commitment now, commitment to finish the job, commitment to finish. That's what I'm hearing on the ground from poor and low wealth people. And lastly, we must change the poverty measurement. I want to talk about that somewhere, maybe come back, because the poverty measurement is 60 years too old and too little. So we must make sure when we say we'll move people out of poverty, we're not just using a measurement that actually may move people out of the official poverty or the supplemental poverty measure, but it does not move them out of desperation. It does not move them out of low wealth. Our goal must be poverty and low wealth transformation until everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the very pursuit of happiness.
All right, Reverend Barber, you want to come back and talk about that next weekend. It is a date. Sister Campbell, thank you both so much for your time.